Here we have AP Statistics 2008 Scoring Guidelines, question 2. So this is the oldest question we've done so far. This is about school boards surveying. A proposal has been submitted that would require students in elementary schools to attend school on a year-round basis. Do you support this proposal, yes or no? And then it says that they got responses from 98 of the families, with 76 indicating support, but they sampled 500, so obviously they had a lot of non-response bias. What is a possible consequence of non-response bias for interpreting the results of the survey? It is possible or probable that only parents who felt strongly took the time to respond. Also, parents who have the time to respond might be more likely to respond yes, is what I meant, than those who don't, or else that sentence is real stupid. I meant they might be more likely to respond yes. Yeah, this is why you should always double check your answer and read over it at the end. As a result, the sample proportion of yes responses, 76 over 98, is likely much higher than the population proportion of yes responses would be. Just sound really stupid. Okay, you can read this if you want. Essentially correct if the student clearly links the effect of non-response bias, of non-response to biased estimation by explaining why population support for year-round school would be overestimated or underestimated from the sample results. So you need to indicate from your explanation that it's an overestimation or an underestimation. That first sentence is probably not enough to get essentially correct. My second sentence with the word yes should be helpful, but that last sentence definitely says what's going to happen. It explains the consequence. So I feel like with my first and last, it should be enough, even though I left out the word yes. They said partially correct if the student describes a reasonable consequence in context of the study, or a difference related to an issue between families who are likely to respond and families who are not likely to respond. So I explained it would be overestimated. You need to have that overestimation or underestimation in your explanation to get full credit. If your explanation's a little bit weaker, if you just explained that first part, but you didn't indicate that it would be above or below, that would be partially correct. Someone advised the local school board to take an additional random sample of 500 families and use the combined results to make their decision. Would this be a suitable solution to the issue raised in part A? No, most parents in the second sample will also probably not respond, so you will still have biased results. Even if all 500 did respond, you can't mix biased and unbiased results. The combination would still be biased. The way I was thinking about it earlier, think about it as poisonous. I'm not going to mix poisoned food and unpoisoned food, and that results in not poisoned food anymore. It just results in a more diluted poison, but still poison. So this works the same way with bias. You can't mix biased results with unbiased results and expect your results to be unbiased. It's still biased if you have part of those numbers as biased. So they said essentially correct if the student says no. Taking another sample will not solve the problem with non-response bias, and explains that non-response bias in the original sample would result in non-response bias in the combined sample, regardless of the results from the second. So if I had stopped there, you would still have biased results. That wouldn't be enough. They're saying I have to indicate it doesn't matter what happens in the second sample, it's still. So even if the 500 did respond, you can't mix biased and unbiased, the combination would still be biased. That part is good. The second sentence, did the most parents in the second sample also likely not respond? That did nothing for me. That didn't add or detract from my points. But it didn't hurt either, so it's fine that it's there. Partially correct if the student says no, taking another sample will not solve the problem. but provides a weak explanation, or the second sample will produce similar results to the first sample. So if I had stopped there, that's exactly what they just said. That would be a partially correct. Or if your explanation was just very weak. Incorrect if you said yes, or if you said no, but you provided no explanation or an incorrect explanation. Or obviously if you didn't put anything at all. Part C, they should throw out the old data completely. They should then select and a new sample. I was getting very tired once I got to this point because I did both FRQ packets all in a row. Select a new sample and make follow-up contact until everyone responds. It might be a good idea to also reduce the sample size to make follow-up with all the people easier. So here, if you want to pause and read what they wrote. Oh, they said just contact the 402 families from whom responses were not received and ask their opinion on the proposal. So instead of throwing out the old results, they're contacting the people who didn't respond to the original survey, or take a new random sample, or take a census to help increase the response rate. Yes, so they're saying the same. Basically, you need to be making follow-up contact with people who don't respond the first time. That's essentially the minimum requirement you need. Essentially correct if they provide an explicit description of a reasonable strategy for reducing non-response in a new survey or by following up with those who did not respond to the original study. But somewhere in there, you have to talk about follow-up contact to make sure you get everybody in your sample. Partially correct if they suggest non-response could be reduced or response could be mandatory without providing explicit description of a reasonable strategy. So if you just said make the results mandatory, how do you make it mandatory? How are you guaranteeing that they do it? I make all of your homework mandatory, but you don't all do all of your homework. So just mandatory is not good enough. The follow-up contact, when I annoy you and bother you until you get it turned in, that's follow-up. Okay, same results. I don't feel like reading them, so if you don't have it memorized by now, then you need to pause the video and see what score you got. I got a 4 out of 4.